So raise your hand if you've heard of 1% for the planet. And keep it up there if you feel comfortable with a quick 2-sentence summary of what it's all about. Do I have a taker right here?
Sure.
Nice, okay.
Essentially, it's looking at the bigger picture of what business is and owning a degree of ecological stewardship. And you take, Patagonia takes 1% of the profits and reinvest it in generally nonprofit organizations that have an ecologically based mission.
Yeah, fantastic start. I would clarify 1% of top line revenues directly to organizations focused on issues of sustainability. The organization certifies that the member companies do their giving, and we license a trademark for them to use. Any questions about the model? Great. Well, that was a really meaningful talk from me, and I enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it. No, I mean, really, when I'm out there talking generally, I talk 1%, and I will do as well today. But it's an interesting time for me to be here, and both I'd say turning points on the horizon personally and professionally. And as I was thinking about this moment, I was like, I would be remiss if I didn't find a way to mark those. I mean, you seem like a pretty good audience to do that with. So I do want to talk 1%, but I want to weave a few other things in. So here's the plan. I was thinking about, it's been about 20 years since I've been in this field of business and environment generally. So there's starting to be a bit of history there, and I love history, but I hated it in high school. I started to love it when I realized what I really loved were the stories about the people and their personalities and their struggles and their triumphs. And so I thought, maybe I could weave in a few stories along the way about folks that I've encountered. And the other thing is, as I was getting ready for this talk, I ran into a quote that really just knocked me back. And I was reminded of the power of quotes. And I thought, would it be possible to weave an entire talk around like a series of quotes? I still don't know the answer to that, but you're about to tell me at the end if it works. So we got a little history, some quotes. We got personal, professional turning points. I don't know if I can land this plane, but at least you know where I'm trying to fly it. So if I don't, you can appreciate the effort. I'm not going to let you guys off the hook, by the way. Anybody know where this quote comes from? This is giving me a sense of where you are on the business and environment spectrum so that I can tailor my content. Close. He's a little older than Wendell, who's still kicking. It's David Brower. And anybody, quick bio sketch on David Brower? So he was, so Claire, I don't think this guy's working. That's all right. David was a pioneering alpinist. He probably has more than 60 first ascents up in the Sierra. He was the first executive director of the Sierra Club. He founded Friends of the Earth. The guy, if there's a dictionary definition of authenticity, I'd be surprised if his name wasn't one of the definitions. In his own words, he walked the plank twice, which meant he got fired twice for not compromising on his principles. And I start with this quote for a couple reasons. One is, as my first job out of college, I had a chance to hang out with David, and it was actually right after he wrote this quote. And as a young man, you're looking for that true north. And for me, this said it all. I didn't need any other words to describe my purpose in life at that point. It was very clear to me. No business on a dead planet. That's what it's all about. We're going to save the planet, and that's going to enable everything else. Clear and simple. But I also start with it because, for me, it underscores some of the complexities involved. Because, right now, the most profitable industry on this planet is in the business of fundamentally changing the chemistry of the atmosphere. So they seem to be doing fine. And that seems to be a paradox, given that quote. The other thing is, I myself inherited an organization, 1% for the Planet, which was actively using this quote on its website and all of its other literature on this black background. And if you click through the homepage of the website, you'd immediately get to an encyclopedia of all the terrible things that were happening on the planet. And I said, sorry, David, as much as you were a true north for me, originally, we're going to have to do something to make this a more inclusive movement, because we were talking to a very small audience of people back there. So we rebranded the organization, and unfortunately, David is now prominent in my memory, but not as much in the positioning of our organization. Being less bad is not being good. So that first job out of college, it was about preventing one company from doing one thing. That was the less bad part. But I was interested in wrestling with those complexities, and I was interested in that question of what is good really all about. And so, at the time, I reached out to a bunch of different companies to see, would you let me in? Would you give me a shot at trying to help you figure out what good looks like? But back to the previous job, we were entertaining direct action to prevent this particular company from building a gold mine. There weren't a lot of companies at that point that were willing to embrace, an activist off the front line. So I ended up going into grad school to wrestle with this question of what good meant, instead of going right to another frontline situation. But the other thing I wanted to mention relative to this quote is Bill McDonough. Is he familiar to anybody here? Just a couple of people. So he's an architect, famous architect who's done some extraordinary projects, including completely rebuilding the Rouge plant, which was like one of Ford's iconic manufacturing facilities. And he's known for his brilliance. He's also, it's kind of inside fun in the business and environment community to poke at his outsized ego a little bit. And but I would say, without that outsized ego, we'd be nowhere relative to where we are right now. And so bring it on. I think every movement needs a guy like Bill and an ego to go along with. People familiar with Paul Hawken? Probably wondering how long it would take me to get to a Paul Hawken quote. It took me, I wasn't even out of college when his book, The Ecology of Commerce, came out, and Ecology of Commerce came out, and I had the opportunity to hang out with him that summer. And I remember, going up after his talk and saying, "Dude, I'm totally in. I'm going to commit my career to this space. Where do I go?" And he was fantastic. Over the years, I would write him an encyclopedic monologue, and he would send back a postcard with an incredibly pithy quote. His trademark 1-2 punch, just like incredibly brilliant, encapsulates the issue, and sent me on for another year before I feel compelled to write another encyclopedia. The cool thing about Paul too is it was about 6 years later, his daughter and I ended up in grad school together, and we had the opportunity to hang out right after he wrote the book Natural Capitalism with Amory Lovins. And I'll never forget that, because the night before he was going to come talk to us about his book, he didn't sleep at all. And it was because there was this air conditioning unit or something making all this noise outside of his window. But it wasn't the noise that was killing him. It was just this idea that here's this machine that's designed to produce a temperature change that's wasting all this energy creating noise. And I was just like, okay, dude, nice occupational hazard, But the other thing that was fun is I think people in that room, when he came to talk the next day, expected, okay, we're just going to sit back and listen to what he wants to say. But he came in and said, what's on your mind? And nobody said anything. So I was like, okay, Paul, what did you learn writing this book that you thought was most interesting? And he said, I just can't believe that there hasn't been more action on the part of companies, meaningful in this, 6-year period since he had declared it not just feasible for companies to become more sustainable, but he declared it a strategic imperative that they do so. So what do you do, when your hero blinks? That was an interesting thing to wrestle with. And in my case, what I did was I got lucky. Coming out of grad school, I had this tremendous opportunity to go into timberland and to try to make that company as sustainable as it could possibly be. And I'm really proud of what we accomplished over 5 years there. We developed systems to rate the environmental performance of our factories and our products, and we reduced our carbon footprint by 15%. We adopted organic cotton. We had green building principles. And I got really good at rattling that stuff off in a way that could leave you with the impression that we were, on the road to a different future. And I was good at it, but no one in the world can touch this guy, Joel Makar, when it comes to the litany of things that companies are doing. Anybody heard of Joel? So he's got a site called greenbiz.com and a bunch of other green biz properties. And in fact, he's so good at rattling these trends that every year he publishes what is literally the encyclopedia on green business practices of the previous year. And I actually had the audacity last year to try to sit down and read this thing. And it's just like, bam, bam, bam. You're reading all these incredible accomplishments and you have the feeling that you're riding this wave and it's cresting, we're bringing it into shore. I mean, we've harnessed the energy of capitalism here and we're gonna use it in service of this mission of sustainability and we're there. And then, somewhere like way deep into the text, I run into this quote: if current trends continue, there will be no meaningful reduction in emissions before you. It's like the emperor's clothes all of a sudden just dropped. You're telling me this is window dressing. But actually, I realized that it was not going to take us far enough, fast enough, a while before, and that was at those Timberland days when I felt like, this is great in terms of describing what might be possible in some future state, but it's not going to define the change that we seek, and so I had an opportunity, to go run this organization called 1% for the Planet, which was started as an internal project at Patagonia. And when I got a look at it, it didn't have any full-time staff. I basically accepted the job on a basis of a weekend trip out to Yvon Chouinard's ranch, and I was just like, I'll do whatever it takes to, hang out with this guy more and see what we can do. They shipped me the organization in a tiny filing box, and then it was only a year later or so where they were like, yeah, we had no idea whether this thing would work at all. But what I recognized in it is a couple things. One, it had this tremendous brand equities as a result of the founder, but most importantly, to me, it really meant something in terms of its power and potential. It had a purpose, and that was to equip activists who, historically have been at the root of every meaningful change with, not just resources, but with the respect that they deserve. I mean, being someone who's been in the environmental field my whole career, take any typical airplane. Guy next to you says, yeah, what do you do? Environmental community, activism, nonprofit work, boy, is it a showstopper. But I felt like, harnessing market forces, creatively leveraging brands, inspiring companies to do things they wouldn't otherwise do, that can get traction. And this was fun for me just a few years ago to see Paul Hawken back on a similar course, understanding that all the trend lines are going in the wrong direction. The health of every natural system on the planet is not just in decline, but the rate of decline is accelerating. But he says, and I agree, if you see the people out there who are actually doing the work to try to reverse those trends and you're not optimistic about what they can accomplish, you haven't got a pulse. So there's his 1-2 punch thing again, by the way, which I absolutely love. And just think about it. I mean, over the past century in this country, every meaningful shift in consciousness about environmental issues has been accompanied by an activist. Muir, Carson, Laurie David, forcing Al Gore's hand to turn his slideshow into a movie. You owe your very consciousness about those issues to those individuals. And I don't fundamentally see change happening on a terribly different vector going forward. So, anybody know where this quote comes from? You gotta give it a shot. Or, okay, the author of this quote, Julie Ward Howe, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Quite possibly, if you looked at the arc of history in this country, one of the most popular songs. And I just think, what she did was tremendous. She was an early activist in her day, right, a suffragette. This song became the rally cry for the North in the Civil War. And I just think, the strategy that she employed, she took the most popular song in the day, John Brown's Body, and put new lyrics to it. And by the way, she wrote this song in the middle of the night all the words came to her while she was asleep. And she woke up, she tried to fumble around to find a candle, could barely get it lit. She found the stump of a pen, and the next morning, the whole thing was written out in her hand. The story of what she did is particularly moving to me because she's my great-great-great-grandmother. But how do you leverage the model that we have, in service of these activists in a way that's going to get people to pay attention? And so what we've done at 1% for the Planet is I've been incredibly fortunate to hire some unbelievably smart people to access some of the best marketing talent that I think is out there on the planet, to take some risks, like turning our organization into a record label, to produce an album that did a huge amount to raise awareness and funds for the work that we're doing for the members of our network. Having a business plan, having something more than the file box that held those initial license agreements, that stuff is starting to pay off. And right now, more than 1,400 member companies in 45 different countries, we're doing funding on the tune of $25 million a year, which makes us one of the largest funders of environmental work on the planet. And we're finally to a point as an organization where I feel like things are clicking. We're sustainable. We have a great team in place, and the world is our oyster. We could think about 1% for a day, which could engage any of the big companies. We could think about an individual program where we're encouraging consumers to do the same thing. The Roundup thing where they're checking out from an online purchase and adding more funds, a credit card. And when I was referencing that professional turning point, these are some of the things we think about. I forgot to mention that people are taking notice. 1% is now being called the gold standard for corporate philanthropy. But with all these accolades and opportunities on the horizon, it can be a real challenge to sort through. So I feel incredibly grateful that our closest advisor, mentor, spiritual guide in this movement is probably the most grounded person on the planet, Yvon Chouinard. And he's been there, on the edge with his climbing. But he's a great reminder for the fact that as soon as you try to be or do something that you're not, the sooner you try to have it all, the sooner it isn't going to work. And another really interesting partner in this effort for us is Casey Sheehan, who's now the current CEO of Patagonia. Incredibly soulful person, and I love this quote: "Global transformation begins with personal transformation." And so for me, right now, personally, I'm slowing down and really trying to go a lot deeper, because that's what we're trying to do as an organization. Really look at the network that we've assembled, build those relationships, make sure that the quality of our work is as good as it can possibly be. Make sure the impact that we're having is nothing short of extraordinary. Also looking for inspiration in unusual places. Like, I think pretty much every quote that I've had up here so far either came out of a book or a piece of incredibly famous literature. And you guys should all go research The Battle Hymn of the Republic, by the way, after this. But this one, Galen Brown, I can guarantee you've probably not heard of Galen because he's our marketing director. And this came out of an flip email that he sent earlier in this week, and I had to read this a couple times to realize just how profound I thought it was. And what a good job it does of capturing the impact that we're actually having right now as an organization. I sent out an email to our whole network a couple weeks ago, just saying, hit me with what's going on, what are you seeing, what do you care about, what are you doing, what do you think is going to move the needle. It was unbelievably electrifying to get the response from that. For one thing, we have some brilliant writers in the network, the most passionate people I've ever encountered in my life. Damn, are they smart? But the thing that was fascinating for me was really hard to identify any particular trend line. I mean, it was just everything that you could imagine under the sun just happening, and quickening of consciousness events all around us, people untapping things that were previously thought to be impossible. I love that notion, and I do see it happening. It gives me great hope. And as far as the road ahead, personal, professional challenges, the burnout factor, in our field is really, really high. Passionate people trying to make it all happen. And for me, this has become the most useful, worthwhile phrase. I think I'll be thinking about this one for the rest of my days, just to find that middle road. And I'm thankful for the career in endurance athletics that I've had up to this point, because I think it speaks to that idea of, just right below your anaerobic threshold, make it happen. So, not sure if I landed that plane or not, but that's about the the end of what I wanted to say. But thank you for listening.